फ्रेंड्स, तो आज से हम लोग अपनी NCERT का जो 6 to 12 है उसका क्लास 6 का पहला चैप्टर स्टार्ट करने वाले हैं। ये हमारी NCERT सीरीज़ UPPCS, UPSC, BPSC और अन्य सारी परीक्षाओं में आप लोगों को बहुत काम की सीरीज होगी। तो शुरू करते हैं चैप्टर 1 से। व्हाट, वेयर, हाउ एंड व्हेन, क्या, कहाँ, कैसे और कब। तो इसमें हम लोग देखेंगे देयर आर सेवरल थिंग्स दैट वी कैन फाइंड आउट अबाउट आवर पास्ट, लाइक व्हाट पीपल एट, द काइंड ऑफ क्लॉथ्स दे वॉर एंड द टाइप्स ऑफ हाउसेज इन विच दे लिव्ड। ठीक है। उसके बाद वेयर डिड पीपल लिव, तो पीपल कहाँ रहते थे, लोग कहाँ रहते थे। पीपल हैव लिव्ड along the banks of this river for several 100,000 years. Some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers, that is, people who gathered their food. They knew about the vast wealth of plants in the surrounding forests and collected roots, fruits and other forest produce for their food. They also hunted animals. Suleiman and Kirdhar hills are some of the areas where women and men first began to grow crops as wheat and barley about 8,000 years ago are located here. People who began rearing animals like goat, sheep, and cattle and lived in villages. Garo Hills in northeast were some of the other areas where agriculture developed. The places where rice was first grown are to the north of the Vindhyas. नाउ हम लोग जानेंगे कि व्हाट आर कॉल्ड इंडियन सब कॉन्टिनेंट्स। अक्सर हम लोग सुनते हैं इंडियन सब कॉन्टिनेंट टर्म, तो इट इंक्लूड्स द प्रेजेंट कंट्रीज ऑफ इंडिया, पाकिस्तान, बांग्लादेश, नेपाल, भूटान एंड श्रीलंका एंड द नेबरिंग कंट्रीज ऑफ अफगानिस्तान, Iran, China and Myanmar. South Asia is often called a subcontinent because although it is smaller than a continent, it is very large and is separated from the rest of Asia by seas, hills and mountains. ठीक है, तो आगे बढ़ते हैं। About 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished on the banks of river Indus and its tributaries. Later, about 2,500 years ago, cities developed on the banks of Ganga and its tributaries and along the sea coasts. In the recent times, the area along Son and to the south of the Ganga was known as Magadha. उसी को मगधा कहते हैं, जो कि बिहार में। Its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. उसी को हम लोग मगधा एम्पायर, मगधा किंगडम भी कहते हैं। Kingdoms were set up in other parts of the country as well. और भी जगहों पर जो राज्य हैं, जो किंगडम है, वो सेटअप हुए थे। Names of the land. Two of the words we often use for our country are India and Bharat. The word India comes from the Indus, called Sindhu in Sanskrit. The Iranians and the Greeks who came through the northwest about 2,500 years ago and were familiar with the Indus called it the Indus or the Indus, and the land to the east of the river are called India. The name Bharata was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest and who are mentioned in the Rig Veda. The earliest composition in Sanskrit dated to about 3,500 years ago. Later it was used for the country. ठीक है, finding out about the past. There are several ways of finding out about the past. One is to search for and read books that were written long ago. These are called manuscripts because they were written by hand. This comes from the Latin word manu, meaning hand. These were usually written on palm leaves or on the specially prepared bark of a tree known as the beech, which grows in the Himalayas. Manuscripts were often preserved in temples and monasteries. These books dealt with all kinds of subjects, that is, religious beliefs and practices, the people of the lives of kings, medicine and science. Besides, there were epics, poems, plays. Many of these were written in Sanskrit, others were written in Prakrit, language used by ordinary people, and Tamil. We can also study these writings on the relatively hard surfaces such as stone or metal. मतलब पत्थर और मेटल पर भी ये राइटिंग्स मिल जाते थे. Sometimes kings who got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read and obey them.